Last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. The state senator from Nebraska claims the DHHS retaliated against his family after foster children were removed from the home of his stepdaughter when she started asking questions about the problems within the state's foster care system. Two mothers from Nebraska call the child protective industry out over their bullying tactics. And then the Nebraska state legislature decides to investigate the state's child welfare reform efforts. In California this week, more than 600 foster kids say they don't get enough support to succeed in school and make it to college or a good job, and a bill to open California's dependency court proceedings to the public has been submitted to the legislature. Florida wants to redesign its foster care program so that they can reunite families faster, and Minnesota tries to improve its performance in settling foster children before they reach adulthood. While facing budget cuts, the state of Idaho comes to the conclusion that it would not be cost effective to drug test welfare recipients, and the South Dakota House of Representatives rejects a bill to drug test welfare recipients in the state, citing the starving child whose parents can't get help. Social workers in Iowa put innocent people on the child abuse register, oftentimes getting them fired or making it difficult to get a job. In Kansas, grandparents are lobbying for a child custody bill so they can have custody or access to their grandchildren who have been removed from their parents. A new report out this week reveals that poverty is rising in Michigan as they cut social services, while at the same time Michigan plans to hire 500 new DHS caseworkers. A lawmaker in Missouri doesn't think that the child protective workers should leave their business cards if their targets are not home when they come to investigate accusations of abuse or neglect. New Mexico looks into problems with its child protective industry after a kid dies in a failure to protect case. In North Dakota, lawmakers introduce a bill to change the child questioning procedures in a child abuse case to protect falsely accused parents. Police in Oklahoma are struggling with what to do with the kids of parents who they throw in jail. In Texas this week, Casa puppets and others join out to cry out against budget cuts. And the system sucks are up in arms over a Super Bowl ad where a fake baby gets thrown into a glass wall, claiming that it's insensitive towards child abuse and injured children. A new study claims that there is no racial bias in the child protective industry, and another study claims that kinship caregivers don't get nearly as much help as foster parents. China launches an anti-child trafficking campaign, and Ethiopia revokes the license of a U.S. adoption agency who it accuses of child trafficking. The chief executive of Ireland is calling for a complete overhaul of child welfare. The Netherlands wants to start giving contraceptive injections to parents who lose their kids to the child protective industry. New Zealand is in hot water this week as the United Nations criticizes the country over their child poverty rates. Meanwhile, New Zealand teachers are complaining about a lack of action on the part of the child protective industry after they rat parents out. Yet if they don't rat them out, they can be prosecuted. According to WikiLeaks, drug company Pfizer bribed Nigerian officials in an effort to cover up the deaths of children during a drug experiment back in 1996. And victims of abuse in the Swedish foster care system are set to receive compensation and public apology from the government. In Australia this week, the federal Senate agrees to an inquiry into the practice of forced adoptions between the 1940s and 1980s. The Victorian Child Safety Advocate slams the child protective agencies over a report that claims more than 700 children were exposed to sex offenders. And children in Australian foster homes are prescribed ADHD meds at more than double that in the general population. In Canada, the Newfoundland authorities snatch a baby based on the parent's IQ scores. And the child protective industry in Manitoba is being sued because of abuse in its foster care system. In England this week, the children's minister is upset with columnist Christopher Broker's unhelpful campaign against child snatchers and forced adoption. In Wales, the number of at-risk target families of unborn children hits a 6-year high. The UK cuts overzealous background check requirements on most people who work with or near children. The British government is up in arms after a UK Boy Scout troop holds a mock kidnapping of Prince William's bride-to-be. And the UK is offering generous incentives to anybody considering taking in foster children. In entertainment news this week, teen Psycho mom star Amber Portwood and her ex get back together and are talking marriage. Oprah Winfrey's half-sister has had quite the life, including drugs, criminal behavior, and mental problems. People are starting to call for the head of Dr. Phil over his role in the abuse of an adopted Russian child in Alaska that was exploited on his show. And the ever-fine Angelina Jolie says she is not going to adopt another child from Haiti. A tortured teenager from Sacramento sues the child protective industry for not protecting him from abuse in a foster home. The child protective industry in Pennsylvania is being sued for leaving a girl in a foster home where she was raped by a teenage boy who shouldn't have been there. care. In this week's Foster Crimes Report, a foster dad from Canada has been ordered to trial for the death of a 13-month-old foster child. An arrest has been made in the 2000 murder and rape of a 13-year-old girl who ran away from foster care. In Guam, a vice principal is arrested for failure to report child abuse. A Pennsylvania judge goes on trial in regards to cases where he received kickbacks in exchange for jailing youths in corporate-owned juvenile detention facilities. A judge in Virginia is accused of covering up fraud where a guardian ad litem padded her bill. And a former CPS worker from Washington pleads guilty to child molestation. DCF in Florida is investigating how an 11-month-old boy in foster care ended up with a fractured skull. And although the judge gave her unsupervised visits, he still refuses to give the kid back to its mother. A father from Missouri has been fighting for the chance to raise his son for the last 6 years. And finally, tonight, a foster child from New York steals $500 from his foster parents and spends it on marijuana for his foster brothers and sisters. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.